Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm John Kalfa. Let's talk about some wolves. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm John Kalfa, along with our producer, Stephen Rivera.
Hello.
We have a very special guest today. This is Leo Leckie. He is our wolf expert from Yellowstone, who is now on staff here at Wolf Connection. Leo, for a little bit of background, used to work in Yellowstone with the wild wolf packs that are there. Leo, I want to jump right into this stuff because you are just a fountain of knowledge since you've come up here. So just give everybody a background about what your role was when you were in Yellowstone and what you were working with.
Sounds good. So prior to joining Wolf Connection, I was fortunate enough to live among wild wolves of Yellowstone National Park for 10 years. During that time, I had a number of roles. I was a wolf guide, specifically taking people out to see wolves, a wolf historian, and a wolf researcher. And during this time, this is where I really started learning about the intricacies of wolf behavior and pack dynamics. And I started taking in the many stories that wolves kind of have to tell. And those are stories that I like to share in Wolf Connection today with the programs that we do, as well as in print and other storytelling venues.
Yeah, you like I said, I noted at the top, you're a busy guy. You have a lot of things, in the fire right now. Just so everyone knows, we're doing this via FaceTime audio, so there's a little bit of a delay for those of you that are listening. I want to get into because I've read some of this. What exactly does a guide in Yellowstone do? What's the routine, I would say, for when you're leading a group of individuals to possibly go see a wolf pack out in Yellowstone?
Gotcha. Yeah, so this could would take out different groups of people. It could be anything from a family, a number of individuals of a family who've come together, to student groups, to boards of land trusts, to organizations like Defenders of Wildlife and Sierra Club and things like that. And so we do this in either single day or multi-day types of programs. A single day program would be meeting my clients, whoever they might be, before the sun comes up. In the summertime, that's 5 o'clock in the morning, so it's very dark. The idea being is we want to be out there in what's called the light hours just before sunrise, which is the best time to see wolves in the wild. It's when they're most socially active. It's when you get to experience the most amazing behavior among the wolves usually. And so that's kind of the main thing. And then depending on how the day unfolds, we would be traveling to different locations. There's a lot of territory to cover in Yellowstone, 2.2 million acres. And so there's a lot of territory to cover to try to find the whereabouts of any one of the 11 wolf packs that occupy the park.
And so you're a historian as well. So you're obviously sharing all of the knowledge that you have. And you were there remind me, were you there for 10 years or was it longer or shorter than that?
10 years, basically 2010 to 2019.
Okay, yeah. So you have...
And I was
Go ahead, you can finish.
Yeah, I was a guide for about the last 5 years of that decade, and started doing historical work. Was interested in wolves from a number of years before that, and I was doing historical work and research on wolves prior to becoming a guide.
And so that leads really right into the one thing I saw that you it looks you were a co-author or I and let me know if I'm getting that wrong because I looked it looks like it's a book. It's called Charting Yellowstone Wolves, the 25th anniversary. It has all sorts of wolf charts on there. Looks like it's about the lineage. Talk to us a little bit about collecting that knowledge and what goes into putting something like this together. And just give us a brief background about what that Charting Yellowstone Wolves is, and then the information that would be in that book.
Right. Great. So, yeah, it is a 280-page tome of basically what we know about the lives, both the pack lives and the individual lives of Yellowstone wolves from the first year of reintroduction of the wolves from Canada and Montana. 1995, 96, and 95 and 96 were the introductory years, and they brought wolves from both Canada and Montana down into Yellowstone. And these charts and these stories cover the packs and the individual wolves themselves, uh, from those very first wolves in 1995 to the wolves you would see on the landscape today in Yellowstone. So the first half of the book are basically wolf charts that Jim Halfpenny and I have been working on for a number of years, that he started before I ever came on the scene back in 1995. But I've been working with him on them for many years now. And that kind of gives you the pack information. The second half of the book actually is the life stories of the individual wolves. And it's delineated by their radio collar number for the most part. Um, the name a wolf is given in Yellowstone is basically that wolf's radio collar number. Where they're a famous enough wolf but don't have a radio collar, they're given a name that's kind of representative of some kind of physical feature of the wolf.
So if you were to give people an example, something, why would a wolf be named? Give us a name of a wolf and something, one of the wolves that that you've been tracking that and give us a reason why they would be named as such.
Yeah, yeah. A good example would be one of our favorite stories that we have in the book, and that's the story of Triangle. Triangle is named such. Triangle is a black wolf, and almost all black, these are black coated wolves. So the species is called a gray wolf, and they come in two general coat colors, gray or black, though there's a lot of nuance and color uh, within those general gray and black coats. But most black coated wolves have what's called a blaze on their chest. That blaze is a patch, usually a whitish patch, and comes usually is a different shape. It's never the same with any two wolves. And the blaze on Triangle's chest was in the shape of a triangle. So he was never radio collared, but he was a famous enough wolf, and there's a pretty nice story about him that gets told pretty frequently that Teo talks about as well. Teo Alfaro in Wolf Connection. And it's kind of a hero story of sorts about this wolf. And that would be one example.
So the one thing I do want to bring up, because you mentioned the black coats, is we have a few of the wolves or wolf dogs here at Wolf Connection that we call that they're black phase. So they start out all black and they start to phase into gray. Can you give us a little bit of background of how that got introduced into the wild? And correct me if I'm wrong, there weren't any black coated wild wolves that was introduced via human. Am I correct on that? Or because I feel like that's something that's been a myth that's been peddled around. I just want to get clarification on that from you.
Yes, you are correct about that. So once upon a time, um, tens and tens of thousands of years ago, there only used to be gray coated wolves on the planet. And then in North America, that we know about 40-ish thousand years ago is the general idea. A gray coated wild wolf mixed with a semi domesticated animal that was a wolf that had become part of a human pack, a human village, a human group. And what that did is it brought the black color allele gene into the gene pool of gray coated wolves. And we have had black wolves, black wild wolves in the wild, North America in particular, but other places around the world ever since.
Yeah, I feel like that was always something because and it's something when I give tours that I'm never actually sure about the numbers or the dates for that. So I appreciate you just sort of clearing that up, really as cleanly as you did. What's something that you found in all the research that you've done for this one book, for this Charting Yellowstone Wolves book, that really struck you over the last like 10 years? What, if you can pinpoint one thing or two things that really stuck out to you as you were going back through these charts and writing this book?
Let's see. There are so many different things. We one really important thing that we have come to learn, having been in this unique biological experiment of being this close to wolves in the wild for 25 years, and me in particular for the last 10 years, is that a lot of the assumptions we had about hierarchies of packs, for example, get thrown out the window. There used to be a belief that packs were hierarchical, and that was identified by roles alpha, beta, omega, and there was, basically there was assumptions like only the alpha pair bred within a wolf pack. They were the only breeding pair within a wolf pack, or the alpha pair were the first to feed at a carcass site, and everybody else waited their turn until the alphas were done before they would come in. Well, through this, being able to, learn about wolf behavior over these many years, we've come to discover that actually a wolf pack is more cyclical in the contributions of each member. And you have each member, as we talk about in Wolf Connection as well, who brings their own individual talents to the overall benefit of the pack. And it's not hierarchical at all. It's actually each individual stepping in and assuming their role and their talent within the pack. So that would be one example.
Yeah, and that's such a good thing to get out there as well, because we talk about how with the westward expansion, how these wild animals were sort of categorized or put into roles specifically because of the way we think as human beings, and that there needs to be a hierarchical system. And it's very interesting to see that it's, like you said, it's a very cyclical pack dynamic, that all these different roles and these different animals can get along for really the betterment of the pack and the wild, and how interesting that dynamic really is, and with all the research you guys have been doing.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that had really stuck out to me through being among wolves in the wild and writing out their stories is the individual personalities of each of the wolves really comes to the forefront, and you can't really characterize a wolf just because of its role. For example, an alpha in one pack could be a very different type of leader than an alpha in another pack. Some alpha females allow other females within the pack to breed, where other alpha females do not. So there's a lot of that personality and individuality that really represents itself through these stories and through observations.
That's got to be something that you specifically, and I'm sure most of your colleagues have seen that each pack is so uniquely different, and there's so much diversity in those packs that it there's not you can't really confine the wolf itself to say that all packs are going to act the same, all roles are going to be the same. Is that something that you found that was something that you learned along the way, or how did that strike you when you saw that out in the wild?
Definitely learned it along the way and saw it represented in the wild in many instances. One instance in particular was really interesting. It was my first year that I was in Yellowstone back in 2010, the summer of 2010, and there was a wolf pack that occupied one of the most famous wolf territories of Yellowstone National Park called Lamar Valley. And this wolf pack called the Silver Pack was the resident wolf pack at the time. And what had happened is a younger alpha male had come in and displaced the an older alpha male. This younger alpha male came from a totally different pack, displaced the existing alpha male in this pack. But instead of there being any kind of battle, confrontation, uh, any kind of aggression. Instead, what happened is the alpha male that took over, 147 was his name, radio collar number and name. He um, he actually not only allowed the older alpha male to stay in the pack, but he actually showed that alpha male an amazing amount of respect and appreciation. The pack would go out on hunts, and I witnessed this on numerous occasions. They would come back, and the old alpha male would be tailing behind the other members, pretty much almost limping along. He was upwards of about 8 or 9 years old, which is pretty old for a wolf in the wild. And would be following behind the pack. And after the pack got back to their rendezvous area to meet their pups and bring back the food to the pups at the rendezvous area, um, the alpha male in particular would bring food to the old alpha male. He would lay down beside him, which I think we have seen that kind of behavior happen in Wolf Connection itself too. And he would lick the muzzle of that older alpha male and just show him amazing respect and appreciation.
And I feel that, and that's such a beautiful story that I feel again that's one of those things that has been put in myths and legends and things like that that younger wolves would necessarily almost routinely kick older members out, or they would the weak would have no place for that. And really, it seems as though with all the research that's being done that's the opposite of what takes place in the wild.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So when you're doing all this, work, you're doing this amazing work, and just to preface, I want to have you on again because we're not going to be able to cover everything in one episode, obviously. So you're doing all this work, you're out there in the wild, you're a guide, you have all this knowledge. What was the situation, or how is it that you found your way to Southern California and to Wolf Connections Gate?
That's a really good question. I think it's a it's a story I love to tell too. Um, so in November of 2018, we were running a program, what's called a winter wolf retreat, and we had a number of individuals attending that program. And two people came out from California to speak to this. This program was actually catered specifically around wolf behavior. And the two people that came out were the founders of Wolf Connection Teo and Renee Alfaro, and they spoke to our group, and that was the first time I'd been introduced to Wolf Connection. I was immediately impressed and impacted by the compassion that the two of them had and their knowledge about wolves, and was compelled by the idea of wolf therapy and connecting with the hearts of wolves. And at the time, I said to myself, someday I really would like it to make it out to the Wolf Heart Ranch and be able to see this place for myself. Well, it so happens that there was a young lady in that program that that I hit it off with, and we fell in love very, very quickly. And she lived in the Los Angeles area, and we immediately started finding ways to get together, and I came out to Southern California on a number of occasions. And on one of those occasions, I reached out to Teo and Renee and asked, if I could come and take a look at the ranch. And it turns out that the young lady that I had developed this relationship had been to Wolf Connection previously, back in the boy, I think maybe the fourth year of the organization's existence. And the two of us went out, and Teo and Renee gave us a tour of the ranch and really talked to the two of us a lot more about wolf therapy and how they create ways for humans and wolves to connect, and for both to benefit through those types of programs. And I was hooked. And eventually, I moved out to Southern California to be with my girlfriend, and reached out to Wolf Connection to see if there was any way that I could lend my own individual talents to the organization. And today I'm lucky enough to be able to tell stories about wild wolves for Wolf Connection. I've been working there since September of 2019.
Well, we are forever grateful that meeting happened. And I actually remember I was coming back from a school presentation with Amanda, and your red car was actually right behind us as we were going in the gate. And I'm wondering, who is this individual who's coming up the driveway? And it so happened that was the first time I met you. And that's when you initially were having those discussions to join our team. And we are forever grateful that you've made our way here, and expounding on our
Well, I
knowledge.
tell you, the feeling is memorable for me as well. I remember thinking, "Oh yeah, they're definitely got to check on me," and then following you guys in with the truck and then you letting the two wolves. I think it was Gemma and Hoban that you had taken to do a school presentation that day, and I learned a little bit about I had no idea that you actually went to the schools to do presentations, and was really impacted by the amount of work that happens at Wolf Connection to really make these connections possible.
So this is a question that we've asked before, and I'm curious from your perspective. Speaking of Wolf Connection and your journey here, do you have any stories of maybe either some major similarities that you were surprised to learn that our captive wolves and wild wolves have in common, or equally interesting, any major differences that you've noticed now that you've spent some quality time with the wolves at Wolf Connection?
That is a great question. I have been amazed at the similarities that exist between the wolves at Wolf Connection, who come from domesticated or other backgrounds other than being wolves in the wild, and the wild wolves that I have been lucky enough to witness in Yellowstone. One example that comes to mind is the story of Annie. And there is a wolf in Yellowstone that who had the name Tripod before she was ever given a radio collar number. And the reason she was called Tripod was just like Annie, she had three legs. And just like Annie, having three legs did not impair Tripod's ability to show her true wolf self in the wild. Not only that, but excel and behave in a way beyond what humans might think would be the case for an animal that had three legs. So just like Annie, Tripod survived, not only survived, but actually in many ways became a more impactful wolf within her pack. She stayed with the wolf pack for many years until finally, at the age of 4, she was radio collared. And it was not until then that we realized she was missing her right rear leg that had been, removed in whatever fashion. There, never knew for sure how it happened, but kind of just below the hock of the leg. And so she was radio collared. Not only did she continue to keep up with the pack, but she eventually became an alpha female of her own pack with three legs. And the similarities between Tripod and Annie are pretty amazing. And there are a number of other instances like that that I can think of similarity wise. As far as differences go, the difference would be physical mostly between wild wolves and wolves in wolf connection, where the wolves in the wild are bigger in general. And of course, they don't live as long of lives because they are wolves in the wild hunting prey that's anywhere from 3 to 5 times bigger. And the number 2 way that wolves die in the wild is from the hooves, horns, and antlers of the animals that they hunt.
That's really interesting. Wolf stories are so powerful from a human perspective. And I'm curious, as someone who's studied wolves on this level, why do you think there's such controversy around the subject of this species? As far as the ESA is concerned and their reintroduction, so many other animals, they sort of just fly under the radar for most of us as far as the legislation related to them and their survival. Why do you think as humans we're just so provoked by wolves?
Yeah. So wolves, as Teo talks about in his book, he goes back to tens of thousands of years ago and talks about how wolves are more like humans than, let's say, the apes from which humans evolved. So that biological background. And so we're, sociologically speaking, community wise, family wise, wolves are much more like humans than any other species out there, or humans are more like wolves than any other species out there. That elicits a lot of love on the part of people and passionate feelings toward wolves, but there's also a lot of misunderstandings that arise and myths that have been perpetuated over time, fear that flies in the face of a lot of the scientific evidence that we have on hand that reveals that wolf depredation really happens to a smaller degree, and it happens to an even smaller degree when you allow a wolf pack to exist and not do things that to break up the dominant pair of that wolf pack. So I could go on this for a long time. But one example I'd like to use is there are a number of ranches. So despite the fact that there are these, individuals out there who are afraid and don't want wolves on the landscape, there are a number of ranchers who practice peaceful coexistence with predators. That would be, primarily grizzly bears and wolves. And they do it in a way that allows them to peacefully coexist with those predators while raising livestock, for example. One example story I like to tell is was told to me by these ranchers. They were out one day and saw a wolf pack actually chasing a group of elk. What had happened is elk have been in the Yellowstone area. Elk have now been living with wolves for 25 years. And we like to say that in Yellowstone, we have a leaner and meaner elk. There are elk that have learned a lot of ways to survive among wolves. And they're definitely a harder prey to hunt today than they were back in 1995. So this particular group of elk actually ran into the rancher's herd of cattle and kind of got into the middle of it, thinking that that would, give them a moment of protection from the wolves that were chasing them. What instead happened is the wolf pack moved into the herd of cattle and combed their way through the herd of cattle, eventually pushing the elk out of the herd and continued on with the chase. And this was witnessed by the ranchers themselves, and it's a perfect example of uh, imprinting that happens from parent to pup. So we're allowed to exist in its best form. This imprinting happens where the parent, indicates to the pup what the prey species is. And that's why you can have wolves loping past cattle and not paying attention to them. It's the same reason that wolves don't attack humans. We've had no attacks of humans by wolves in Yellowstone, and only a couple on the planet, and those were extreme starvation like scenarios. The few that have happened on the planet, actually two, I think, in recent history,
That's
modern history.
that's such a it's an amazing coexistence, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean that's such a great. I think that's a
So
great
that would,
story to tell.
that's yeah, I think it's impactful. Another impactful, thing to think about is this whole Little Red Riding Hood story, where actually in the original story of Little Red Riding Hood, before it was changed, Little Red Riding Hood sleeps beside the wolf in the middle of the forest and survives the night.
Wow. And so, what was the turn? Do you know offhand what that turn was?
As opposed to, that gets told today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, where the wolf is the one that eats Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, Leo, this is all the stuff that you're telling us is. I mean, I love all this information. I want to have you back if that's cool with you, and we can go deeper into some of these things. I want to have break up and do some episodes with you just strictly on the legislation angle of it and the the hunting and the preservation of what's going on there in Yellowstone, among other things. But I want to close just with one thing for you, since you've lived, breathed, this species, you're for the better part of your life. When you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to mind for you?
Wow. The thing that comes to mind for me is a being that is totally connected with her or his environment. Um, lives in the landscape and makes the most of every opportunity, connects on the most meaningful and deep levels with those that he or she is closest to, and just exemplifies the idea of what a family, what a pack, what an individual with it working within that dynamic, can be. I think that's a pretty powerful message that I like to think about.
That's awesome. Leo, thank you so much for doing this remotely. I know we're practicing all safe practices. Just give everybody if they're interested in ordering that Charting Yellowstone book, give them the website where they can find that, and also give people your social media handles that they can follow you as you release these legacies and these stories and things like that.
Sure, that would be great. So to order the book, which is titled Charting Yellowstone Wolves, the 25th anniversary edition, go to tracknature.com. And from there's a books link at the top of the page. Select that books tab, and that'll take you right to a link where you can order the book. And then there should also be a number of, if you were to go to eBay and also type in Yellowstone Wolves, you'll actually bring up a number of books, other books that I've written, life story books, 3 of them in particular, about 3 of the more famous wolves of Yellowstone, and a couple ancestral posters as well. And in addition to that, so my Facebook page where I do a lot of posting, I have about 5,500 followers and friends, would be facebook.com/Leo.Leckie, Leckie, and that's Leo, Leo. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you just do a search on LinkedIn under Leo Leckie, my name should come up. I have a blog on WordPress where you can follow individual stories as well. That's leoleckie.wordpress.com. I also have a number of videos on YouTube I have a channel called Yellowstone Leo, and that has over 100 videos on it that cover not only wolves, but other creatures I've been lucky enough to be among in the wild. That's a couple links.
Cool. That's awesome. You got it covered across all social mediums. Leo, thank you so much for all the information. We're going to be doing this again.
Sure.
We have multiple different subjects to talk about, but thank you for spending some time with us. And good to talk to you, man. It's been a minute. So continue to stay safe, and thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you too. It's been great sharing this with the both of you, and I really look forward to doing it again. And can't wait till the time where we can actually do it in a way where we're within the same studio.
Right.
Yeah, man, we feel that. All right. So till next time, thank you everybody for joining us. Howls to all of you, and we'll talk to you all later.